You're live.
Ladies and gentlemen, thrilled to have you here for yet another epic debate. This is going to be a lot of fun. And if it's your first time here, consider hitting that subscribe button as we have a lot more debates coming up. For example, you'll see at the bottom of your screen this weekend, we are arranging a debate with Team Skeptic and Flat Earth Aussie. Also, tomorrow, Darth Dawkins will be on with Red Venture. So that should be a lot of fun. We are very excited, folks. Want to let you know. This is going to be, well, we'll let the debaters let you know exactly what the debate is about. But this time, it's personal, folks. So they have brought their personal feud. It is here, and it is, I know you guys think I'm going to use that old joke where I say, like, Taylor is like Steve's son, but he's not. Come on. He's his stepson. And today they're sorting it all out. So this is going to be a lot of fun, folks. Want to let you know I've put both of their links in the description. So if you're listening and you're like, I want to hear more of this gent. Well, you can by clicking on those links that I put in the description for you. And this is going to be a 10-minute opening where you could say class will be in session as Snake will be teaching Steve there. By the way, the thumbnail is a total joke between Steve and Snake and I. So it's not supposed to like be pushing any idea. It's just a spoof, but it will be a real debate. And so we are going to let Snake start with a 10-minute flexible opening. Steve has the option if he would like to do that. Otherwise, if you'd like, we can just jump right into open conversation followed by Q&A. So if you happen to have a question, fire it into the old live chat. If you tag me with @ModernDayDebate, makes it easier for me to put everyone in the list. If you do a super chat, that's an option at which you can make a comment toward one of the speakers during the question and answer, and it'll also push your question or comment to the top of the list for the Q&A. So with that, very excited to be here with you gentlemen. Let me first just say thanks so much for spending time with us today.
Glad to be here. I'm looking at the outside. He has a bigger window than I do. Favoritism. All right, whatever. I'm like in the corner over here. I'm like really small, but yeah, it's all good. Hey, real quick, hit that subscribe button because YouTube is having issues with unsubscribing people, and you may not even know that you've been unsubscribed. So make sure you're subscribed. Check it.
Stoked to have you, Steve. Thanks so much. And stoked to have you as well, Snake. So the floor is all yours for that 10-minute or so opening, Snake.
I'm just going to share my screen here. All right. So in true MDD fashion, first and foremost is a little bit of joking around. So, of course, I'm going to argue from I have longer hair, and therefore I win. You cannot defeat this main. But in all seriousness, I hope we can come to a respectful understanding here today with our conversation. I don't want to spend too much time on definitions, but I have to get to it first. And so here are the actual arguments. So there's got to be a disambiguation between the proposition of a knowledge claim and a belief. And so typically it would be philosophically, atheism is the proposition that a God does not exist in that specific context. And then in pretty much all other contexts, including psychologically, atheism is simply the lack of belief in a God. And so I think we agreed that this debate would be about whether agnostics are atheists, and obviously that will have to depend on the definition of both of those words. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it is a necessity. So the first argument is that we're using the word atheism wrong, and that no academic source will state otherwise, and this is false. And then tons of academic sources state that atheist is a person who just does not believe that a God or divine being exists, or a lack of belief. The Oxford Dictionary of Philosophy states that it's either the lack of belief that God exists or the belief that none exists. The Oxford Dictionary of Psychology, similarly, is one who lacks a belief or rejects a belief. The Oxford Dictionary of Atheism is a belief in the non-existence of gods, or more broadly, an absence in their belief or existence. And it also says that negative or weak or soft atheism is synonymous with non-theism. And Steve has admitted in the past that agnostics are non-theists, so by this definition, atheism does encompass agnosticism. And negative atheism is a legitimate philosophical position. and to leave this distinction out is to be less precise, not more precise. This distinction helps us understand the reasons and the extent of one's beliefs or atheism. Negative atheism, therefore, by definition, as a lack of belief, being synonymous with non-theism, includes agnosticism. And I know most people are not going to take Wikipedia itself as a source, but a cursory glance at this will give us a good idea of what is in normative and popular usage. And I don't think... it's just a good litmus test and a good way to decide which of our assertions is actually borne out in the language, in the conversation. And I have a hard time believing that all the professional philosophers would just allow Wikipedia to misrepresent entire fields of philosophy if these were not normative usages and positions and categories. It can get confusing, which is why there are so many categories. And implicit atheism is what is has agnosticism within it. It's a real category, and it includes agnostics and babies, even in academia. I also wanted to point out global atheism versus local atheism, and by this definition, Steve is also an atheist because he has denied, he's asserted that certain gods do not exist. So by this definition, he is a local atheist, but still an agnostic. So if you deny that at least one God concept is false, even the most pure, most neutral agnostics are still atheists. So are all these dictionaries wrong? Or is this just a bad argument? Dictionaries are descriptivists, so if you disagree with the dictionaries, you're prescribing a different usage of the word, and that's not a very convincing argument to me. Other than use value, I think you could possibly make a case, but I don't think that case is here, because the more categories you have, the better the usage is, to a certain extent. Another of Steve's arguments is that one that I personally am bothered by is that atheism is being used politically to increase the ranks and numbers of organizations of people who are ostensibly just non-theists, which again is synonymous with weak atheism. But if this is true, then Google and all these other academic sources that I've cited are just in on some conspiracy. Is this true, or is this just another bad argument? All these organizations are clearly using the correct term of atheism, which the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy says there are many correct usages of atheism. Another argument is traditional usage, and that would just be the etymological fallacy. And so if you're saying X used to be defined as something else, therefore that's what it means, that's a fallacy. And then another one of Steve's arguments is basically this is an argument from analogy, and as we know, arguments from analogy usually fail at some point because analogies are not, they're just metaphorical approximations. So he'll say something like, let's define non-theist as dog, and then we're looking at the question of theist or dog. If you're not a theist, then you're a dog, and therefore anything else is either a theist or a dog. And I think this is a pretty weak argument because dog is not at all germane to the problem of theism, and it's not even a proposition, so it's just a bad analogy. Again, there's more than one correct definition of atheism, even within philosophy. So atheism, I would say, is best understood as an answer to the question, is there a God, or do you believe in a God? Those who answer no would be atheists, but can include agnostics as well. Saying, I don't know, can be considered indirectly answering, but is in fact not really an answer at all. So by all usages and definitions of atheists except one, there is very specific usage in a specific context. That's not useful in most discussions, and it's not even used in most academic discussions, or not all academic discussions. So in all usages except for one, agnosticism is atheism, or in some cases it can be theism, as theists can believe in a God but not claim knowledge. So this means agnosticism is belief without knowledge, and this comports to the definition Stanford gives. Agnosticism is not lacking belief in either proposition, which are in entirely different categories because this is a psychological state of belief category, not a knowledge claim category. It is the belief that one does not have knowledge of either proposition, so it has no philosophical definition. So if Steve wants to assert he's an agnostic, then he's using the psychological states of belief categories and is thus has to use the softer umbrella term for weak atheism. The Stanford Encyclopedia argues that since atheism is a lack of belief, it is defined by psychological states of belief. Therefore, using the term strong atheism to describe the proposition that gods do not exist is a category error, since it no longer is a state of belief but a philosophical knowledge claim, and so it's a category error. However, the author of this article is, in my opinion, tunnel visioned, so he doesn't understand that there needs to be a disambiguation there, and that the claim to knowledge is that a state of belief, one who can believe that they have knowledge. So it is not a category error, and even if we concede that it is a category error, we can simply state that outside of a specific context of merely labeling God does not exist as atheism within the narrow philosophical context, instead just a general language level, then it makes complete sense to use the umbrella term categories. There is absolutely no reason to limit the definition to just this narrow sense, and the article states as much and has no solution for the phenomenon of so-called new atheism. It merely states that it's a problem, which I don't think it is a problem as long as we use the categories of strong and weak atheism. Distinguishing between strong and weak, Gnostic or agnostic atheism is the easiest way to communicate these ideas across all fields with little confusion. Agnostic is to be used in the epistemological sense, which is exactly what most atheists are actually trying to discuss and say, that they disbelieve because we do not have knowledge about theism. Neither is known. Steve says lack of belief. Steve says it's lack of belief in neither or both, but it's a psychological state. So using philosophical terms only is not a good idea. So I'll end with the point that epistemologically there is little difference between atheism and agnosticism. They're unified by the fact that you should reject an idea if you have no reason to believe it. And essentially what I'm trying to say is it's the debate between atheism and theism is not symmetrical. It is asymmetric. So epistemologically, if you don't have a reason to believe, then the default is to reject it, basically. You don't have a default of accepting the proposition. So that's what the asymmetry comes from. So let's see. No one asks whether you're agnostic towards leprechauns, whether you believe that they don't exist, or that you just lack a belief in them. So why is this distinction important in atheism versus theism either? So I guess I'll round off, I'll finalize with just asking Steve why you wanted to debate me in the first place. Like, what actually led to you requesting this? And then we can just jump in right after that.
Thanks so much, Snake, for that opening. Absolutely. We'll and go forward with that. So the floor is yours.
Awesome. Okay, so boy, I by the way, I furiously took notes. I'm like back in school. This, by the way, I write really quickly when it's not legible. You should have seen my notes from college. I probably couldn't even read them this day. So I am furiously taking notes here because I want to be educated in this. Because the reason why I asked you for because I had actually reviewed the debate that I had with Duke, and when I was reviewing it, you were in the live chat saying that I was wrong about everything. So I said, well, if Snake thinks I'm wrong, let's find what I'm wrong about. And you have a whole bunch of stuff you've just said, none of which I think it has anything to do with what I was arguing, but I will take it at face value because I don't think you've actually shown that I'm wrong on anything. In fact, you've actually correlated exactly what I've been kind of saying, which seems to be odd to me. But okay, so in my notes, you say that atheism is a proposition of knowledge, not belief. Did I hear you right? And I'm not doing an opener. I don't need 10 minutes. I want a dialogue. So atheism is how a proposition. If the proposition of theism is God exists, what's the negation of that?
Well, that would be hard atheism, as I would define it. So the negation.
Sure, but what's the proposition?
Yeah,
though?
that's a specific context. So the proposition God exists or God does not exist.
But okay, so the proposition of theism is God exists, and the negation of that would be the proposition God does not exist. That's not a knowledge position. That's a belief position, correct?
It can be either.
No, these are propositional. These are called dosastic states, right? So, according to Rutgers Philosophy 101, if you look at their syllabus, it specifically says if you believe the proposition to be true, then the proper epistemic status toward it is belief. If you believe the proposition is false, it's disbelief. If you think that it's neither, you have no belief position either way, that's a suspending of judgment. So when we say that the proposition is true, theists are making a belief position, right? They're not making a knowledge claim, because knowledge requires other conditions other than just belief, right? I mean, and would you agree that the standard canonical understanding of knowledge is that knowledge requires the proposition to be true, and the person has to believe it, and then after that, there's justificatory issues, right? Like JTP has justification, reliabilism has reliable means, but in almost all theories of knowledge, except maybe what's called casual theory of knowledge. Other than that, most of them require certain conditions. Would you agree that if theists are saying they believe God exists, they're not making a knowledge claim of that, right?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so that's a belief position. So you said most people are using this later usage, which would be your lack of belief position. By the way, I really hated doing definitions, but since you brought it up, because I don't think it's relevant. None of this has actually attacked any of my actual core arguments, but to get them out of the way, you said it's the most popular usage. Who do you base that upon?
Do you want one example?
Because Oxford said it's not the most popular. Yeah, well, Oxford said it's not the most popular, and Cambridge says your usages is not the most popular. Are they incorrect?
Probably. How come it's in every single definition except for this one narrow definition?
It's not. If you go look at Merriam-Webster's Learners, go look at Oxford's Learner, go look at Oxford's Handbook of Atheism.
Stanford says there's
they all say that
usages. Oxford
there are
defines
multiple
both usages.
Yes.
Google defines both usages.
But what's the most popular? But what's the most popular is a question that you have. That's your claim, right? And I asked, what do you have to substantiate that? Now, I can screen share, I guess, right now. That works? Okay, so start screen share. I got two monitors, so I got to make sure. Okay, so this is Oxford's Dictionary of Atheism right here. It has the number one, which is the one you go by, and the number two, the belief that there are no gods, arguably the most popular current usage. They're saying that the most popular current usage is the way that I use it. By the way, do you agree that the way I use it is pretty normative in philosophy?
No.
You
well, it's normative in the sense that it's used, but it's not the only definition.
It's not the most common. So how many papers do you have that use it in your way as compared to how many papers do you have that don't use it your way and use it my way? I can produce, right now, if I have to, I can produce at least 6 papers instantly that use it the way I have. How many papers do you have that use it the way you use it?
There's several right within the Stanford Encyclopedia that uses it.
Okay, can you name one for me, please?
What was her name? Janine Diller.
Janine Diller. Okay, and her paper?
I'll have to look in the bibliography. But she was taught.
While you do that, we'll get back to that. So you agree on Oxford?
She's talking about local versus global atheism.
Global, yes, local versus global. Local atheism would be atheistic toward one particular god, but not toward all gods, right? A local atheist says that, hey, I believe that God Zeus doesn't exist, but they're not global, meaning that they don't hold the position there are no gods, that the universe is devoid of gods. This is what Russell wrote in his paper, Am I an Atheist or Agnostic, right? And I believe it was 1954, if I'm not mistaken. This is what he was referring to, local versus global. I have no issue with that. I am a local atheist toward certain gods. Zeus does not exist to me, right? Now, I know Ocean Keltroy will probably message me in 5 minutes, but I believe that God does not exist. It's not merely I don't believe. I believe Zeus is mythological, right? I make the claim that Zeus does not exist. But do you agree on Oxford here? It says really clearly, arguably the most popular current usage. You disagree with Oxford?
Yeah,
right?
It says it's arguable, so I'm going to argue it.
Oh, right. No, yeah, sure, arguable. Okay, so I want to get another one real quick. So let me stop screen sharing. Don't want to show you too much here.
I mean, I would be convinced if you took a survey of how many people believe it versus do not, and the way that I disambiguate that, the way that I am convinced is because one, atheism or Wikipedia has these categories that are more in line with the lack of belief, and all of the atheist organizations use that as well. And so I failed to see how a couple of papers can outweigh that.
Well, because papers are what we basically, when you want to go understand something, you want to read about the topic. Generally, it's go look at the experts and what the paper says. So this is from Cambridge's Companion to Atheism. It says, in all cases, we would use the term atheism rather loosely for those thinkers and people who've denied the existence of gods. Deny here in logic means to accept negation. So Cambridge here in the Companion to Atheism, if you read this, uses it in the positive epistemic status. Okay, so you're going to say that Cambridge is wrong on this as
but
well.
You said
I
you
take
didn't
it, right?
want to argue about definitions, so I'm the one
No,
who's
I'm
saying that they're
getting a
both
baseline.
definitions, and you're trying to lock it to one definition.
No, I'm saying what is normative. You said, I asked you what in philosophy when we started, what you think is normative. You say it's not, and you say that your uses are the most popular. I took the note right here. Claim most people are using the latter usage.
Yeah,
and I asked you, does that apply to philosophy? And you said yes. You don't think that's the case. So that's why I'm bringing these.
But you're trying to lock
and I have
the
one
usage just to this narrow philosophical context.
No, I'm asking you if it's normative in philosophy. You answered no. I'm giving you evidence that is on my behalf that is not the case, but you can take it for what it's worth. So can you read this? Is this show? I'm not looking. Can you read this? It says, and hang on. This is Cambridge Dictionary of Philosophy, and it says, a stricter sense denotes a belief that there is no God, which use has become standard use. So your claim that it's the most popular use may not seem to be the case, because here it says standard use that's most popular. Now, again, I don't really care what you think is most popular or not, but I think I've established that in academia, because I can produce multiple papers here if you need me to, you can go look at Burgess Jackson's paper. You can look at Dr. Malpass's paper on defining atheism and the burden of proof, or you can look at Dr. Oppie's work. All of them use atheism in the positive epistemic case. Now, if you find one that doesn't, please let me know. But Dillard does not talk about that, because that's about local atheism. I asked for a paper that uses atheism in the weak case as normative throughout their paper, and I can't find one. But I can, like I said, I can cite you a whole bunch that do right now. Dr. Burgess Jackson, Dr. Malik, Dr. Oppie, they all do. So I think that your claim on that is wrong. But we'll move on to that, because that's like only one claim. Two, you said. You talked about IEP, which is the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. This was written by Dr. McCormick. Now, you seem to miss this one part here. What is atheism? Atheism is the view that there is no God. You disagree with that?
That's one usage. And even your source, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, says that
I haven't got to Stanford yet.
is...
Hang on, I haven't got to Stanford yet. I'm dealing with you brought up IEP.
Yeah, they
right?
all use multiple different usages of the word.
Which has been my argument for 3 years. That there's no one correct usage. That there's multiple usages. And in philosophy, the most normative, the ones that use the most, is the positive epistemic case. That's been my argument. That's, I think, well established. You're saying otherwise, which is okay. But do you recognize that atheism is used in the positive epistemic case in academia? Like right here, preview your paper, atheism is the view that there's no God. Do you agree or disagree with that? I agree
that both are used. Because there's...
I agree both are used. Is this a true statement? Yes or no?
Yes. Both are used.
Okay.
But why are you trying to just nail it down to one?
Because I have people that are saying that atheism is never the belief that God does not exist, or the view that God doesn't exist. That's simply not the case. You agree with that?
That it is never the view? Yeah.
They say it's only a lack of belief. If you go to American Atheist, it says atheism is only one thing. Atheism is not the belief. Atheism is not the disbelief of the denial of gods, which this seems to say otherwise. It is the denial or disbelief in gods, right?
I don't
atheism
think that's
is the disbelief of God.
I don't think that's what they mean. What they mean is, what I mean by atheism is that I'm only lacking belief. They're not trying to say that this is the only usage of the word.
No, that's what it says. No, just with American Atheist is very poignant on that. It is one thing. Let's be clear. It's only one thing, that atheism is a lack of belief. Now, you agree that's not correct, then, if that's how you would be reading it. Would you say that's not true?
I think that's an incorrect interpretation of what they're saying.
Awesome. Well, that's their position. I've talked to Pam Whistler on this. She's the editor-in-chief, and so if you want to go talk to her, she thinks that it's only one thing. Arn Ra, I have a quote from him saying there's only one correct usage, which is quoting American Atheist from his blog. When he wrote a blog about me, Mr. Agnostic, he has in that blog, and I have the quote here. I can actually show it for you. Let me again find it for you. But Arn Ra says that there's only one correct definition. Do you agree with him?
No.
Okay, that's good because I don't either, because I don't think there is one correct definition, nor have I ever argued that there is one correct definition.
There's always multiple uses for words, and
I totally agree. That's my whole point. These are polysemous words. And have you ever watched my video on how I have 8 different ways you can describe atheism?
I don't think I caught that specific one. I've seen a few of your
might want to check it
videos,
out, because that's actually my argument, is that there are multiple definitions, and that merely not believing in God is only one descriptive definition that people have used, which are allowed to use. But in academia, that is not the normative one, but it still exists, absolutely. But I choose to use the more stricter ones, right? The more sensu stricto or strictissimo rather than lato. Those go to the real core of the arguments, which nobody ever seems to get into. Why using sensu lato definitions lead to what's called category errors and possible special pleading. But those are different arguments, which we can happily have a debate on those, because those are, I think, the more important things to talk about rather than this preliminary stuff. But I'm glad that you brought it up. I am. But this is from Mr. Ra's blog here. Okay, so this is right here. It's from American Atheist. Okay, to be clear, atheism is not disbelief in gods or denial of gods. It is a lack of belief in gods. But whatever interpretation you want to give to it, you do agree in philosophy atheism is the belief in gods in some cases, in some papers. Actually 99% of the papers out there. I would say all, but I haven't read all the papers, but everyone I've read has always been the positive case. But can you read what he says here for me, if you don't mind?
You want me to read the whole thing from top to bottom?
Yeah, please. Yeah, no, just the dictionary definitions.
The dictionary definitions match that of the movement itself, proving that the way atheists define themselves is the correct usage.
Okay, and you don't agree with that, because I certainly don't.
A correct usage.
No, is the correct usage. Like, there's only one. I mean, that my usage is incorrect. If his is the correct one, and only the correct one, as it seems to be the argument, then mine would be incorrect. Would that be not logically correct?
Within a very narrow definition, it is correct.
But you agree that my usages are, I don't think there's incorrect or correct to be had here, right? But would you agree that he's a prescriptivist in this? That he is saying that this is the dictionary definition, which, by the way, is descriptive. It gives usages, tells you what. The dictionaries don't define words prescriptively. You did mention something like that earlier.
Possibly,
you agree with that, right?
Could be, but I interpret this as him describing his usage.
But I think this is prescriptive, because I've talked to him, and people have talked to Aaron. If you go listen to him, he is prescriptive about it. There is only one usage. If you listen to his debate with Ozzy, he says there is one usage. Any other usage has been influenced by theists, not a conspiracy theory. That has been his words. Okay, so I think that is prescriptivism, because I'm not a prescriptivist, never have been. Go read my blog. I give my points. I am a descriptivist. I do not say you must use these words. What I say is these words do exist in different contexts, and that for years atheists have been telling people there's only one way to use these words. Anybody who uses these words differently are wrong. That's what I've been arguing against. That's what I've been fighting against for many, 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 many years. And unfortunately, there's a lot of atheists and people out there that don't want to understand the actual argument being had. But let's move on here.
As long as you use hard and soft atheism or any of these other subcategories, that completely does away with any of the confusion between them. It basically synthesizes both viewpoints.
So you agree that weak atheism is logically the same as agnosticism?
I mean, there's subcategories within that. But I would say agnostic atheism, weak atheism is basically synonymous.
They're not the same thing. I mean, okay, first of all, if you use agnostic atheist, do you agree that, even Matt Dillahunty agrees with this, agnostic atheist and Gnostic atheist in the weak condition is nonsensical? Would you agree with that?
No.
Okay, so if you're a Gnostic with a G, atheist, and you're going to use that, what's called an epistemic modifier for a dosastic position, you're saying, hey, look, not just do I hold a position of belief one way or another, I'm claiming it as knowledge, okay? Because I took a survey in preparation for this in the Atheist Experience Facebook group and in other groups, and the most common way they held this is somebody who claims knowledge, that they know God exists. A Gnostic theist would be they know God exists, and a Gnostic atheist would be somebody who claims they know God does not exist. That is the most common usage I've seen. Okay, I come up with 12 different usages for that, but that's the most common. Would you accept that? Arguendo, at least?
Not within, like, regular conversations. Like most internet atheists,
Okay, what is a Gnostic atheist to you? With a G, with a big G, not a G, but yeah, G. What is a Gnostic atheist?
Is someone who claims that there is no God. Or claims to know that there is no God. Yeah.
Claims to know. Okay.
Mhm.
So we agree there. So if knowledge is a subset of belief, in order to know that God does not exist, one must believe it first, correct? Under justified true belief as a canonical standard theory of knowledge, correct?
Yeah. And I know.
Okay. And I agree with you. So how is it the case if you're using atheism in the weak case where you do not believe, are you then able to say that you know if you don't have the belief first? So how is Gnostic atheist makes any sense if you're using atheism the way that the American atheists use in the weak case, or the atheist community of Austin? How does that make sense in that case? And by the way, Matt Dillahunty agrees with this. He said it the other day, and and I happen to agree with Matt on that. When Matt's right, he's right. I mean, contrary to what people think, I do not hold Matt to be a dumb person. He's extremely intelligent, and I don't know where he gets his impression that I think otherwise, but he's right on this. And you can't have a strong position. You can't have a knowledge position if you don't have a strong case on atheism, right? You got to believe first. You got to be a strong atheist, as you would say, before you can know it, right?
Yeah, and that's why there are subcategories within weak atheism and like implicit atheism. So what do you do with those categories? Are they just...
Well, implicit is George Smith came up with implicit atheism in 1974 on his book, Case Against God, right? And all that is somebody who just doesn't explicitly say that there's no gods. But in this particular case, if you have Gnostic atheist with a G, it makes no sense if you're using atheism in the weak case. Now, I'm not a big fan of mixing ontology with epistemological words that go with it. I'm not a fan of that. People know that. But if you're going to do it, at least make sense by doing it. You cannot say Gnostic atheist unless you mean atheist in the positive epistemic case or strong atheism. That's the only possible way epistemologically that makes sense. Do you agree with that?
Say again?
Because knowledge is a subset of belief. You have to have belief before you have knowledge. If you don't believe, you don't have the precondition for belief to have knowledge. Okay.
Yeah.
Agreed? All right.
But
all right.
So if you claim to believe without knowledge, though, what you're saying is that epistemologically you just don't have a reason to believe the proposition X.
No, you haven't met a necessary precondition for knowledge. Do you know what the necessary preconditions for justified true belief are? It's okay if you don't. Okay. It's simple. And by the way, you don't have to accept this theory of knowledge. This is very canonical. It's just basic. But the proposition has to be true. You have to believe the proposition to be true. And you have to be justified to believe that the proposition is true. Right? Now, there are Gettier problems, and there's some issues with that. Dr. Linda Zebzewski, and I butcher her name every time, but I really like her writings, have determined that any belief first theory of knowledge will have epistemic issues due to what's called Gettier cases. I agree with that. I just talked to Dr. Carrier the other day about the exact same thing. He agrees with that. So I don't think it's that weird to say that there's not problems with justified true belief, right? But if we're going to have a discussion on what is knowledge, I think that's a very good starting point, unless you want to argue a different theory of knowledge, which you can. But in justified true belief, do you agree that those three necessary preconditions must exist in order to have knowledge?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. All right, so if you don't believe, you haven't met one of the preconditions. Right? You have to believe the proposition is true, or you have not met the precondition for knowledge. You agree then that if you don't believe, then you can't say you have knowledge of it. It makes no sense. It is like it is nonsensical. Okay, because you have to meet that prior precondition to have sufficiency enough to meet the three conditions for justified true belief. That's why atheism needs to be in the positive case if you're going to use things like Gnostic atheist. If not, it makes no sense. Agnostic atheism is the same thing. You need to use it in the strong case, and then it's just superfluous because it's no different than just saying atheist, right? An atheist is somebody who says, in that case, if you're going to use it as strong, I believe God exists or doesn't exist, but I'm not making it as a knowledge claim. Same thing as agnostic atheist, right?
Why is it defined as a lack of belief, and what's the point of these categories in the first place?
What do you mean it's defined by lack of belief? Those are just descriptions. It's not prescribed. It's described. Yeah.
So that's how a lot of people use it.
A lot of creationists use kind of species and theory as speculation. I'm not here to debate what other people use.
It's an incoherent
I like
usage?
to explain the topic, right?
So you're saying it's an incoherent usage to define it as lack of belief?
No, I've never argued that in my life. It's incoherent to use lack of belief atheism and then put agnostic modifier in front of it. Because then you're saying you have knowledge, but you don't meet the prerequisite belief condition to have knowledge. Because knowledge is a subset of belief.
Yeah, but Gnostic atheists believe that there is no God.
Correct. And that's the strong case.
But they also believe that
Gnostic
they know.
atheists will believe there are no gods, right? So that's atheism in the strong case. This is what I'm arguing. To have Gnostic atheist make any sense whatsoever? And again, I hate juxtaposing those things together, but this is that you do. The only way it would literally make sense is if you're using atheism in strong case. So I think you've established that. All right. So back to my original question, though. Weak atheism and agnosticism, you believe logically are synonymous, right? Because by the way, I agree with you. This is one of my main arguments. Weak atheism and weak theism and agnosticism, I have a proof for on my blog. If you go look at my blog, I have a full structured logical proof that those are logically indistinguishable from each other, though there are epistemic differences. But a weak theist and a weak atheist are logically agnostic. Do you agree with that?
I would just basically, but I would say that the agnostic position is more like under the atheist definition. If you're saying that atheism is a lack of belief, then that counts as agnosticism.
Right, and it's also a lack of, but by the same token, a weak theist can say you lack a belief that God does not exist, right? So you're a weak atheist and you're a weak theist at the same time. You just mirror the proposition, right? I mean, if you have the proposition God exists and you don't believe that, you're a weak atheist. If you have the proposition God does not exist and you don't believe that, theist can go, you're a weak theist. Or if not, that's special pleading. That is actually one of my main core arguments on my blog that has not been ever addressed by atheists, which I wish we could actually talk about those kinds of arguments, right? Because I think they're far more productive than this preliminary stuff. But I am happy that you actually have brought the preliminary stuff. I really am. But can you read this for me too? This is on Stanford Encyclopedia, which you brought up. Let's see here. By the way, I think you did misread a little bit on your agnosticism here. But a couple things. So here it says, I'll read it. That's fine. Therefore, in philosophy at least, atheism should be construed as the proposition that God does not exist, or more broadly, the proposition that there are no gods. Do you disagree with Stanford, Dr. Paul Draper from Purdue on this?
I mean, if you're going to limit it to a certain context, I don't disagree, but I disagree that saying that's the only way you can define it.
Nobody's arguing that. Nobody's arguing you have to use words certain ways or anything like that. The argument is, he argues that if in philosophy, if you want to go read a paper on it, every paper that I found uses it in the positive
most
case.
People.
So if you use it if you use it in the weak case, how will you understand that paper? Because that's not the way they're using it normatively.
Yeah, but normally most people are not saying that they're omnipotent.
That's not my argument.
To know the entire universe and know that there are no gods at all. They're just saying.
I'm not. You're conflating knowledge now. We're in dosastic realm. We're in beliefs. You're moving to knowledge. We're not talking about knowledge. We're talking about beliefs.
But
you can believe God does not exist. That's not a knowledge. But I'm not talking. This is not talking about Gnostic atheism. This is saying right here, atheism should be construed as the proposition that God does not exist. If you affirm that proposition, would you not agree that is an atheist by any measure, any definition? If somebody says, "I believe there are no gods," we're both going to agree that's an atheist, correct?
Yeah, but
okay.
The proposition God does not exist does include a knowledge claim.
No, it does not. There's no knowledge claim there. That's a problem. I think you're confusing knowledge with information, right? Or information about. You know about something, which is informationally, you have access to that, right? But that's not what knowledge is epistemically. In epistemology, knowledge is a very specific predicate to a proposition. If I say I know P, that means I met certain preconditions, like justified true belief, which we went through earlier, believes it true, P is true, and you're justified, right? It has very specific conditions. It's not that you know about the proposition. That's an equivocation error that you have. That's another fallacy called equivocation fallacy. You're using knowledge two different ways. We're using knowledge epistemologically to mean the disposition or epistemic status towards a proposition that you are saying that proposition has met those three criteria. That's what it means by when you see that, know that P, you see it written that way, know that P, that is what it means. It means that you have met those conditions. It doesn't mean you know about. So you don't have to have knowledge to have a belief condition. Right? I can say, you have to know of it, but that's using knowledge in a different context. That's why you got to be careful of equivocation. But there's one other thing I want to read to you here. But I got to find it.
But that's why I'm saying it's it's asymmetrical, whereas
Absolutely. Some
some people, their epistemology is, I don't believe because I lack evidence. And so that's as far as...
Yeah, that's a justificatory condition. That has no relevance to anything. That's a justification.
Sure
That's actually what's more called evidential agnosticism, but that's a different argument. So right here, just again, Paul Draper says, an agnostic is a person who has entertained the proposition that there is no God, but believes neither that it is true nor that it is false. Not surprisingly, then, the term agnosticism is often defined both in and outside philosophy as the principle or any or any other sort of proposition that is intended as a psychological state of being agnostic. So agnosticism is a psychological state here because psychological states cannot be tested by argumentation. So when we say that you have a propositional state like atheism or theism, which is a position on a particular proposition, agnosticism has no position either way. So when it says an agnostic is a person who has entertained the proposition that there is no God, but believes neither that it is true nor that it is false, is Dr. Draper wrong on that?
No, but that would be under the umbrella of negative atheism or implicit atheism.
It's also on the umbrella of negative theism too, so it doesn't, whatever. Yeah, it's non-theist. We all agree upon that, theist or not theist, right? But that's not the question. The question is, and by the way, Dr. Oppie makes it very clear, agnosticism is no more closer to theism than it is to atheism. So you would have to disagree with Dr. Oppie as well. And by the way, side note, when you cite somebody and you cite an authority in the field, that's not an argument from popularity fallacy, okay, or from authority fallacy. That's called argumentum ad versum, which is a very proper way to cite things if you ever want to write a paper. I've never read a published paper, but I have written papers for college. You cite things. I took a whole semester in MLA format, which I'll never use. But yeah, when you quote an expert, that doesn't mean that you're right, right? A fallacy would be, hey, I'm right because some expert says I'm right. Never do that. That is a fallacy. But when he says that is agnostic, means the proposition is not true or false. What does he mean by that then?
What does he mean by the belief that the proposition is not true or false?
Well, yeah, if I say the sky is green and I say I'm agnostic on P, I'm agnostic on that proposition. What does that mean?
It means that you don't believe the proposition.
It's true, and I don't believe the proposition is false, right? I'm agnostic on that
proposition. But the proposition's all that matters in this discussion. If the proposition isn't proven, then it's by default, epistemologically.
You don't need to prove anything. What do you got to prove? I believe that there's a lot of calculus proofs I can't prove, even though I believe that they're true. I believe aliens exist. I can't prove it. I barely remember how to prove square root 2 is irrational, but I could. But somebody can believe that without knowing how to prove it, can they not? And you don't even have to prove anything. I believe external minds exist. I don't prove it. Science doesn't prove anything. I believe gravity exists. I can't prove it. You don't prove scientific theories, right? Because you want the falsification.
Yeah, the proposition is useless until you can demonstrate it.
No, these are beliefs. These are epistemic dispositions. It doesn't care whether you can demonstrate or not. Whether we're talking about whether you're a justified belief or a non-justified belief, they're still beliefs. I can have a false belief. Why I believe something is important, right? Right? I want to know why somebody believes something is true or false. But if I say the sky is blue, Snake, if I say the proposition the sky is blue and you have no belief either way, that you don't believe it's true and you don't believe it's false, would you agree, typically, according to the Draper, that is called agnostic on P? I'm not labeling anybody. This is again, material facts, not label. Agnostic on P means you have no belief position either way.
Sure. But if you reject the position, then under one of the definitions of atheism...
Be careful on the word reject. What do you mean by reject? Because reject can mean different things.
I mean, you don't accept it to be true.
Okay. Just for clarification, the Frege interpretation of rejection and rejectionism is the negation of the proposition. So if you say you reject something in logic, it means that you generally accept the negation, not just you merely don't accept. You gotta be careful on that. But I know what you mean by that. But I would say don't accept. I don't accept the proposition rather than reject, because then you have ambiguity there. Okay. So let's move on to some other things. I think that kind of establishes the agnostic position. The agnostic says, I don't believe there's a God, and I don't believe there isn't a God, right?
And that's one of the atheist positions too, though.
It's one of the, it's not the atheist position. It is your use of the atheist position. You're making weak atheism to be normative for atheism, which you're allowed to do. Go nuts. But that's not typical. Paul Draper says right here that agnostic on the proposition means you just don't have a belief either way, and you agree that that's true. Now, you're just calling that weak atheism, but it's also weak theism. If you allow for one, you got to allow for the other, or special pleading.
How is that weak theism?
Right? Because a theist will say that I don't hold the belief that gods don't exist.
But they believe that a God does exist.
Just enough.
Hang on, we
have just enough time. I'll give Snake a chance to respond, just because sometimes Steve gets excited. He talks fast, but
I'm drinking coffee. Oh, dude, oh, come on. Hey, wait a minute here. I took all these notes. I'm only at 4.
That's I also, though, am going to mention that it might be a good chance too. We might be able to cover a little bit of extra ground beyond kind of the semantics or definitions in moving to other territory. We might have enough time, but I want to give Snake a chance to respond if you had anything there. Sorry for cutting in, Snake.
Sure, go ahead.
kind of lost my train of thought there. What would? Oh, that weak theism is the same as weak atheism. Yeah.
Yeah, logically, you can go. I have actual proof of this using actual logic. You can go find it on my webpage.
I forget.
That has been vetted. I mean, people. I mean, the head of the Cal State Long Beach mathematics department, the chairperson, Dr. Bill Zemer, who I've known his friends, his wife went to school with me, high school. He vetted it. He thinks it's a really good argument. Not again appeal to the argument of Ericonium, but here's a logician says it's a good argument. And I'm not saying I'm right by it, but I mean it's not like some BS argument.
Well, I
right?
forget. I've seen it, but I forget the structure of it. But I don't see how can.
It's long.
How can you say that someone who believes in a god is in the same category as someone who does not believe in a god?
Same way, because all you're doing is mirroring it, right? Because if using these terms the way you do, which again, I like to discuss the issues if you use your terms that way. Nobody's ever argued you can't. Nobody's ever said that there's one way specifically to use things. I've argued for years, which a lot of atheists don't seem to want to recognize, is if you use these words in these ways, what is the ramifications? What's the baggage that comes along with it? One of the ramifications of this is a special pleading argument that theists could have when they say, look, normally we understand atheism as somebody who believes that God does not exist. If you don't affirm that proposition, you are, or the atheist will say, if you don't affirm that proposition that God exists, you're an atheist, right? A theist will say God exists, and if you don't affirm that, you don't accept that, you're going to call that atheism, correct?
Yeah. As long as I just reject theism.
Okay, fine. Now, this is because this is just a weird thing of language where we describe atheism in these ways. But a theist could come along and say, look, Snake, the proposition of atheism, as Dr. Draper has pointed out and other places has pointed out, is the proposition that God does not exist. If you don't affirm that, you're a weak theist. And I'm just going to call weak theist a theist. If you don't allow him to do that, that is, by definition, special pleading. You're excluding something that you're allowing yourself to do that somebody else does not do without any kind of justification.
I think you're flip-flopping between a knowledge claim and a belief claim. They don't believe.
I'm not talking about knowledge. Did you hear me mention the word knowledge? This has nothing to do with knowledge. This is all dusastic.
The proposition.
What does this have to do with knowledge?
The weak atheists do not affirm that they believe in God, but the weak theists.
But that's a belief position.
If
you believe God or not,
but the weak theists
knowing.
do affirm that.
No, the weak theists. No, again. As soon as you start bringing up knowledge, you've just moved out of the realm of ontology, which is God existing, right? Because we want as I'm a non-theist, right? You're a non-theist. We want to have an understanding of what is factual. We want to understand the reality of our universe, right? And God existing or not is an ontological question. Does God exist or not? It's a binary, right? It's a dichotomy. God exists or God does not exist, right?
So the question's meaningless unless you can show that it is. So it's not symmetrical. So there's the non-theists and then there's the theists, and atheism is a synonym of non-theism.
There's also atheist and non-atheist too. If theism is used in the strong case, right, for somebody who believes there is a God, then there is a symmetry there, where atheism would be the case that believes there are no gods, and anybody who doesn't affirm that, the theist can go, you're a weak atheist, weak theist. And I'm going to call that theist. Dr. Oppie, have you ever read Dr. Oppie's Atheism and Agnosticism? Because it's a really good book. It came out in 2017, and it's a PDF, and it used to be free. I don't know if it still is, but if it is, go check it out. He makes it very clear that atheism and agnosticism, and by the way, he's a well-established atheist philosopher. This is not some kind of conspiracy stuff. Because you mentioned that earlier about putting everybody under the umbrella, being conspiratorial. No, go ask David Silverman. He wrote Fighting God. He talks about it. Go ask Pam Whistle from American Atheist. She told me this explicitly, verbatim. If you don't believe me, go ask my producer Bull. This is political. I'm going to have Dave on probably this week, Dave Silverman. And we get along really well, believe it or not, even though we diametrically don't agree on anything. We actually happen to get along. I don't know why, but I'm going to have him on and we can talk about this. And we'll talk about the political things if you want, because it's not conspiratorial. This is what they do for demographics. They want more people to join American Atheists. They want more voting
Google's
power.
In on it.
This is the same argument that, one sec, and I promise I'll turn over to you. This is the same argument that genetically modified skeptic uses as a utility argument to have more power to change things. It's not a bad argument. This is why you never see me go after genetically modified skeptic, right? Because he and I have had this discussion. I understand what he means. He understands what I mean. And he has a utility argument, which I think more atheists should use that argument. They're already feeders for it, but it's still better than what they have. And especially when you say, well, they're not trying to change things for political gain. This is Anthony Flu's argument in 1972 on the presumption of atheism. This goes back decades. This is standard. But go ahead.
Well, my
I'll turn it over to
utility
you.
argument is that it's just much more clear to say things like strong atheism, weak atheism, and agnostic atheism, because everyone knows.
Well, I've already established that's not the case. I mean, agnostic atheist is I literally on my blog I came up with 10 different ways you can interpret agnostic atheist, like 10 different ways, and logically speaking.
Well, it's just the position that we don't
so I
have
don't think it's more
knowledge
precise by any stretch of
on
imagination.
God, but we don't believe in God.
Wait, okay, can you tell me what you mean by knowledge? Because you keep throwing up knowledge,
Well,
and I don't think
Gnosticism.
And I'm not trying to be demeaning. I'm not. But knowledge means that you've met those three conditions, right? So when you say we don't know God, I agree. I'm not claiming knowledge of God.
But like almost
Right?
no
But
atheists,
atheists will say they
almost
believe God
no
exists.
atheists will actually say that they have knowledge that there is no God.
Why are you back on knowledge?
Well, you just asked about it.
Again, atheism is not the knowledge claim. Atheism, in normatively, again, in philosophy, if you read most of these things, they generally use the positive epistemic state, and that is the belief that God does not exist, not the knowledge claim.
Or-
Huge difference. You're taking it out of one, and you're moving into the epistemology rather than from ontology. I'm going to do the T-jump thing. You're conflating ontology with epistemology. In this case,
Or
it
they
happens to
do
be the
not
case.
believe in God.
Okay. I don't believe in God. So what?
So by that usage,
That's not a
then
knowledge claim.
agnosticism is atheism. It's just one type. Yeah.
Weak atheism, which is weak theism.
No, because it doesn't.
Agnosticism is no more close.
No.
Agnosticism is no more closer to theism than it is atheism in the philosophical
It
context.
is.
Now, let's do this for clarification. Do you agree, and even if it's just arguendo, do you agree that when you read these things, these texts, and you read the Stanford and you read the papers, that the way they're using it, these words, are how I generally use them? Would you agree that's at least the case, or do you want
Some
to
of them.
disagree with that? Okay, like what?
Like some of the paper. Why, you want me to list them off?
Well, I mean, like Burgess Jackson. I mean, he wrote, he wrote about Anthony Flew. You know what? Let me just pull it up real quick. And he actually put out the same logic I put out. Now he used a different predicate, or obviously a different proposition, variable, but the principle holds. But let me see if I can find Burgess Jackson's paper. I usually have it handy here. So let me throw this over here. It's called Rethinking the Proposition of Presumption of Atheism. And by the way, the presumption of atheism is really bad, and Flew actually didn't even believe it later on in life. He became a deist. So this is from, I believe this was 2017, from Dr. Keith Burgess Jackson. And if you go down here, and by the way, yes, I have read these papers. This is why I know about them. He makes it very clear right here, and I can probably make this larger if I need to, if you guys can't see it. My apologies. But as if we let G let be the proposition that God exists, we get three jointly exhaustive and mutually exclusive categories. This is what we by dichotomous, right? I mean, if you have, a dichotomy is two mutually exclusive, right? Here we have three mutually exclusive, meaning any element of one cannot be in the others. Theism, belief that God exists. BSG, where S means subject here, by the way. Yeah, some people you might see it as A, meaning agent, but BSG means believes, subject believes G, where G is the proposition. Why he used G here, I don't remember. But because above he uses P, and there's probably a reason for it, but I don't remember why. But atheism, believe that God does not exist. BS, not G. You'll see me writing like this all the time. Agnosticism, the conjunction, which is and, of non-belief that God exists, or not BSG and not BS, not G. And you'll see me write it the same way, not BP and not B, not P. You'll see me write it all the time like that on Twitter. And by the way, I've been doing that long before I read this paper. This came out in 2017. Is Dr. Jackson wrong for using lines in this way, or do you at least accept that in papers, this is generally how it's normatively used?
I accept the label for P is for not P.
Can you repeat
I
that? I'm
accept
sorry.
that you can have the label atheism for not P, which is God does not exist.
That's fine. Yeah, that's weak atheism. But you also accept that, again, when you're reading these papers, if you want to go learn the topic and learn a little about epistemology, if you go read these papers and you read and you use the usages you have, like for atheism and agnosticism, these papers are not going to make any sense to you because they're not utilizing it the way that you are using it, or the way that the ACA uses it, or that American atheists use it.
It makes.
I mean, it just
does
wouldn't
make
make much
sense.
sense when you read agnostic,
Sure, it does.
right? What?
They
if agnostic means wait, how is that possible? If agnostic is understood as the position, you don't have a position either way on the proposition, and you're looking at agnostic and saying it means with knowledge or something like that, you're not reading what the context of the
means
writer.
Basically the same thing. It's just that the term atheism is a more broad usage. So agnosticism would mean the same thing with my interpretation of it. We have no disagreement there. Just the only disagreement is that basically I'm just using atheism as non-theism, which is a valid.
Yeah, I recognize that. That's if you read my blog, I make that very point. And you brought it up. This was point. My notes are not too methodical, but decent enough. You made the point of asking about dog, I believe, right? Dog, theist or dog, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's called a disjunction. If you only provided two categories, right? Theist or dog, not theist, therefore dog. That's a disjunctive syllogism. You're eliminating one of the conjuncts, right? Or the disjuncts, I'm sorry. You're eliminating one of the disjuncts, right? If I only allow you two, this is what I would call a conceptual dichotomy, right? I've never seen anybody be able to make a logical dichotomy of theist and atheism from first principles. I can from theist to not theist, right? Because you just take the law of non-contradiction, right? So you have not parentheses P or not P. You can then say P or not P, which is true, which is the negation rule, and then just say instantiate with theist or not theist. So from first principles, I can get you to theist to not theist. You're not a theist, if theist or not theist, not theist, therefore theist, right? But you can change the word not theist to anything you want, and it's just a semantic argument at that point. You can say, well, I'm going to make it atheist, theist or atheist, not theist, therefore atheist. This is where Matt Dillahunty comes in and says you must be one or the other. But I have a whole blog on that being not a metaphysical necessity because it's not from first principles. In the atheist community of Austin, how he uses those words, he's limiting your choices by one or the other, and that is a dichotomy. Fine, go, good, whatever. But I can do the same thing and say theist or dog, not theist, therefore dog. It is semantic, but you're just taking that word, that signifier of dog, and you're changing it instead of having not theist, because the theist and not theist is the actual set, right? You have theist and you have the complementary set. Anything not a theist is in the non-theist set. That is a semantic problem, right? Does that make sense?
It's not a problem if you use non-theist instead of dog, because that's actually germane to it.
I'm a non-theist.
Yeah.
You're a non-theist. We're both non-theist. But that doesn't make me atheist. It doesn't entail you must be atheist, right? All atheists are non-theist, but not all non-theists are atheists. Would you agree with that?
Sure, but it depends on what usage you're using.
I agree. There. Hey, debate over. We agree. There we go. That's all I've been saying for 3 years, man. That's all I've been saying. It's that there are usages out there. There's the usages that these atheist groups use, some of them, and there's the ones that the more academics use. I choose to use the academic ones because they do make more sense to me because they lead to less problems like category errors and special pleading, like I've told you. And all I've ever asked is people understand that because atheists have been told for years there's only one correct usage. R.M. Mcrae says there's only one correct usage, right? And that is merely a lack of belief. But as you pointed out, and I applaud you for it, that it depends on if you use their usages, which I deny. I'm not a member of the ACA, or if you use academic standards. I use the academic ones, which is more normative. Doesn't mean the other one doesn't exist. It just means it's far less.
They both exist in academics, also.
I'm not claiming otherwise. What I'm saying is what's more normative, meaning what's used more often, what you ought to use if you want to understand these things, right? Because I've never read a paper that uses it in the weak case. I don't recall one. If they exist, send me one. I'm not saying that they don't. But I read a lot of stuff and I've never found one. Even Anthony Flew paper, he specifically says it is the case that atheism is held to be the position that God does not exist, but I want to change that. Is paraphrased. But that's what he wants. That's what he says. Atheism is the belief that God does not exist. He wants to change it to negative atheism. That was his argument, and he had the presumption of atheism. Anyways, James looks like you want to get in here. Sorry.
So,
are you just eating your mic, or you want to say something?
I was thinking about saying we just to hear if there's anything. I appreciate that you've had coffee, and so if there's anything Snake has,
talking fast for a reason. We only got another 20 minutes or something, or whatever.
We can hear that, and then when you guys are ready, you can go into Q&A. We do have some questions, and so that's something that's up to you guys.
So I haven't got any questions. I'm just focusing right now on you two and my notes. I'm not even bothering with the no offense to live chat. I want to focus on you guys here. Anything else in here? I took a lot of notes, but anything? No, I think we got over most things. I think that he kind of maybe agrees with me now. I don't see what the argument is. I don't see what the debate is. I still, by the way, I still don't know what I got wrong on the debate with the Duke. You haven't pointed out anything I've gotten wrong. Can you do that for 1 minute? Then we go to Q&A? Because that's what the discussion was. What I got wrong with the debate with the Duke.
I don't even remember what I was saying in that. But
that's okay.
Yeah, I didn't know what your
no problem.
What your grievances was before the debate. Because I didn't want to start
fair
it
enough.
up on Twitter or anything before. But
no, that's fair enough.
I mean,
but like I said, you might want to go read my blogs on this because I've had these things for
Yeah, I
years
have.
and I misrepresent it all the time.
I've read it.
Okay, good. Do you find any logical? Just out of offhand, do you find any logical errors? Because I had the gumballs and God, one that's in the video description for this video. I'm trying to explain that a little bit better, I think, because a lot of people misuse that argument, the gumball analogy, and I really want people to look at the gumball analogy and really understand what's being said by it. And I thought I did a pretty decent job. So far, nobody's found a problem with it. Did you find a problem with the logic or anything?
The argument that there's either an odd or an even number of gumballs?
Yes, sir.
I mean,
Yes.
I have a problem with it as an analogy to atheism versus agnosticism, because the analogy I would use is there's a box that you can't see in, and the question is there a gumball in it or not? That would be a more...
Okay, so you don't like Matt Dillahunt's gumball thing.
Actually, no, I don't.
Because I mean, it's funny. His gumball analogy gives you a middle ground. That's the whole point. People say there's no middle ground. Well, there is a middle ground. You don't believe either way. Believes even, believes odd. Don't believe either way. That's 3 positions right there. And there's more. It's like I don't care. That's apatheism. But that is the middle ground. Now he is right. I mean, when you say the gumballs must be even or odd, right? That's an ontological state that is dichotomous. God exists or God does not exist. So either or odd. There is no middle ground to be had there. You either believe or you don't believe. Matt Dillon is absolutely freaking right on that. But that's what my blog points out. People conflate with the no middle ground that they claim does exist between beliefs, right? You believe P is true or you believe P is false, right? But in between those, there is a middle ground. That's where the agnostic lies. It says, look, I'm not believing either way. So as long as people understand how I'm using these words, Matt Dillon, he's really big on that, right? He says, hey, as long as people understand the words you're using, great. Why don't people understand the words I'm using when I'm explaining it very well? I'm not forcing them to use my definitions. I'm not saying they're not atheists if they use lack of belief. Never have. This has been one thing that has been hugely distorted. I have never gone around saying you're not a real atheist. That's no two atheist fallacy. And I think that you got caught up on that because if you go read my positions from 2018 that I wrote, it very clearly says in there that I don't hold the position that words have intrinsic meanings and that if you want to use in the lack of belief, you're still an atheist to me. I'll call you an atheist. Yeah, right, whatever. But logically, you would probably have to recognize that you're still agnostic on that proposition, but you're not using it as a label. I get that, right? But I won't define you. Don't define me, because when people tell me I'm an atheist and I'm logically able to show that I'm agnostic on the proposition in an academic type sense, that is intellectual dishonesty, right? Because they're prescriptively forcing their usages onto me and then projecting onto me that I'm doing that to them when I don't do that. Anybody who follows me, anybody who's been following me for years, I've been on YouTube 8 years. Anybody who's been following me knows I don't do that. They say they do, but it's like 3 men in, was it, remember that story, 3 Men in a Tail? I think it is. Three Men in a Tiger, right? You say something enough, people start believing it, but go ask them for evidence of when I've ever said, you're not a true atheist. Come on. But anyway, I'll turn it over to you. I'm sorry.
Well, on the gumball analogy, I like it for demonstrating like that there's the I don't know category, but I think it works just as easily if you're saying, well, there either is a gumball or there isn't a gumball, and I think that's a better analogy because if we don't know, then there's no difference between it being not known and it being false. Like, you still don't have access to a gumball.
Well,
and
that's
what I think.
But I don't know is an epistemic ordinary doubt, right? When people say, and again, another blog that I wrote on this, what people mean by I don't know, it's just an expression of ordinary doubt. It's not an expression that they don't have knowledge per se, right? What it is more means that we understand these things in general parlance is that I don't have a position on it. If I give you, hey, multiple choice, A, B, or I don't know, means that you don't know whether to choose A or B, right? So in the case with the gumballs, and I have no reason to choose A, even or odd, right? I have no information either way, right? The smart thing to do is not take a position on it, right? Because you can't justify saying that they're even if you have literally no reasons to say that they're even. At that point, it's a guess, and guesses are never justified. The agnostic says, I don't say they're even, I don't say they're odd, period. That's it. God exists and God does not exist. There you go. Now I know people have misused that analogy, but whatever. I mean, this is why I wrote my blog on that.
But
Any parting thoughts from Snake?
well, yeah, I mean, I think that's how most atheists are saying is like, we can't know everything. We can just say that we have no access to this knowledge, and therefore it's not justified to take the proposition, and therefore we're opposed to this proposition.
Why do we have to have access of knowledge to have a belief? Beliefs can be true or false. It doesn't matter. Access to knowledge has no relevancy to whether we believe
Well,
or
it's
not.
just
Absolutely
not
not.
justified belief.
Well, no, you don't have to. But it could be a justified belief. You don't need knowledge for justified belief. You need knowledge for justified true belief. You're missing a condition there. Then the belief can be false. You can have justified false beliefs, believe it or not. I can have a belief and be 100% justified, right? And I mean that a little hyperbolically, but I can be justified to have a belief, but it completely false. It can be wrong, right? That's called a justified false belief.
Mm-hmm.
So they do exist, but a justified true belief, then that has to be something that is true. So I don't know why you think that you require knowledge to have beliefs. I mean, again, you can go into, hey, look, I need beliefs to build beliefs upon. That's called foundationalism, right? You believe something and then you believe upon that, then you build upon that, right? If you go read Sosa's paper, The Raft from the Pyramid, he talks about that if you in classical foundationalism, you have these beliefs that you have, right? Properly basic beliefs or basic beliefs, and then you start building on that with other beliefs. But these beliefs up here are inferable from the ones below. But the bottom ones, the ones that you start out with, right, your axiomatic, properly basic beliefs or basic beliefs, those are unjustified and unwarranted assumptions. They're presuppositions, right? Like reality is real is an assumption we make. We have no way to determine what that would even mean to reality isn't real, or that external minds exist, or that induction will work day to day. These are properly basic beliefs. Those are by which we will then be able to build a framework to have beliefs on. But that doesn't deal with knowledge, though. Anyways, go ahead, James. What do you got? Questions or? Snake?
Gotcha. Let's see. I do, just in the interest of, we've given you a good amount of time, Steve.
Yeah, he has.
And so if you're okay with me giving the last word, I know that you've always got a round in the barrel ready to fire off. But if we can give Snake the last word, and then we will go into Q&A. If you had thoughts on that last one, Snake, you don't have to if you don't want to.
Yeah, well, what I'm trying to say about like the utility of the usage is that atheists are trying to kind of come to this epistemological honesty where they're not saying, because it's dishonest to say that you know that there are no gods like completely across the board without basically omniscience. So it's just an attempt to be more honest and basically come to the belief that theism is false because it lacks any evidence supporting it. And there's little difference between rejecting theism because it's false and rejecting it because it just simply lacks supporting evidence. And I think that unifies agnosticism and atheism, even by the strictest definitions, as more closely related than theism.
So real quick, I know you have the last word, but I want to clarify. Do you think theism is false?
Yeah, well, kind of. I think it lacks supporting evidence, and so basically it's false by default.
Okay.
Or there's no reason to believe it.
That's a strong atheist, by the way. But anyways, okay, Q&A. Let's do it. What we got?
If you want, we can give you another last word, Snake.
I'm sorry. I had to clarify that. We're going to be here all night.
Basically, I just think that it's a better usage of the word to have these qualifiers, saying strong atheism, weak atheism, things like that. And using atheism in the broad sense is better than using just non-theism, because one, that's lame, no one uses that word, and two, it just allows us to break down like the epistemology of it. It's like, I'm not rejecting it on the basis that I think it's false necessarily, although I would think the vast majority, if not all of us, are rejecting at least one God concept, but that we're just rejecting it on the basis of lack of evidence.
Gotcha. Right. Thanks so much. Appreciate it, gentlemen. And want to let you know, folks, couple of things. One, as I mentioned, both of these gentlemen I have linked in the description. So that way, if you're listening and you're like, ooh, more please, you can have more. And Also want to mention, this is something that a friend of mine is in med school, and she said she'd like me to share this survey. So basically, I will read this out loud. It's in the description right underneath Steve and Snake's links. In particular, this is a survey about the COVID-19 pandemic and how it's affecting you. So this is a real, like a, genuine, right out of the University of Colorado research study, and partnering with the University of Utah. And you can help researchers understand how it's affecting you, namely the pandemic is. And then all data will be anonymous. And you were invited to share the survey with your own social media networks if you would like. That link is in the description. So want to highly encourage you to consider doing that if you want to kind of give a little help to science in everybody's small way that we do it. So thanks so much, and we will jump into those super chats. So thanks so much, Mothra J Disco, who said the only difference between Steve and Darth is... That was all they said.
That I'm right and Darth's not.
Gotcha. Well, he'll be on tomorrow. Wouldn't that be a fun one, folks? Okay. Steve Mcrae and his dear friend Darth. I don't know if you know this. They're brothers.
Yeah,
could be a good one.
That's my boy. Yeah.
Yes. And Jesus Islard, thanks for your super chat, who says, congrats, James, on the success of the channel. Thanks so much. It is because of people like you and the debaters that make it fun here. And so I just really enjoy this. So thanks so much for everybody hanging out with us. And Genius Tracks, thanks for your super chat, who said, weak theism is an oxymoron. Being a theist already implies a belief in the affirmative.
That begs the question. That's
not a neutral belief.
That just begs the question, though. I mean, atheism is generally in the positive too. So is theism. If you have one in the positive, you can have the other as a positive. That is mirroring. So you're just begging the question by saying, "Hey, theism is the belief that God does not exist," but I'm gonna sign atheism instead of being a belief as a lack of belief, right? So that just begs the question. The only reason atheism is the way it is because we frame it that way, but you can mirror it just as easy. A theist is allowed to do that. If not, that is special pleading. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. And
the Snake want to address that?
Yeah, it's a Snake if you'd like. You can.
What was the question one more time?
So they said weak theism is an oxymoron. Being a theist already implies a belief in the affirmative, not a neutral belief.
Well, I would just say that I'm not sure where he's going with that, but I would say that that's what distinguishes weak theism from weak atheism. Is just that they're accepting that belief.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the proposition that it's true, and if you don't believe that, that's the weak case. Yeah, he's right. Okay.
Gotcha. Jesus is lard. Thanks for your super chat. Who said if coronavirus is P, then ...
Then.
I think they're making fun of you, Steve. I can't tell.
I think okay, Corona beer is pee as well. Tastes like pee.
There are people that won't buy Corona beer for that very reason. That's pretty sad. Not that I like Corona anyways. But
yeah, it tastes like
pee. That's a whole
debate.
I'm an IPA person. So.
Next up, Steve's old friend and arch nemesis, the Duke is the man. Thanks for your super chat. Who says, "Hey, Steve, is let's see." Are claim and belief, are those words synonymous?
A belief is the position where you hold that the claim or what's called the propositional content to be true. Now, I usually sort and say the beliefs are claims, but that is not technically correct, and I'm aware of that. I've always said that. Look, this is one of the times that's called a heuristic approach to understanding. But when you say that I believe a proposition, you're saying that the propositional content is true. So that is a claim. I believe God exists is a claim because you're supporting the propositional content to be true that it is the case that God exists. So theists are making a claim when they say that God exists, or it is true that God exists, or that they believe God exists. Because remember, in deflationary theory of truth, it is true that God exists and God exists mean the exact same thing. There's no distinguishing difference between them. Saying God exists is a truth claim in deflationary theory. That saying it is true that God exists adds nothing to it. So those are claims. Yes. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. You got it. Thanks so much. And thanks for your super chat from the Chad, who says in all caps, Steve, can we get a team up of 1 second, it's loading. That's embarrassing. A team up of
great expectations. What?
Can we get a team up of Steve and Snake versus Theus? Please, in all caps. They would like to see a tag team between you
Depends
guys.
on the theists. You think I'm going to talk to Nephilim free? You got to be out of your mind. I would rather poke my
he's
eyes out
so
with pencils.
fun.
Darth Dawkins,
They're
actually.
both so fun.
What about Darth Dawkins?
Hey, no, look. Hey, okay. First of all, I've known Darth for a long time. When Darth came over and he started doing presuppositionism, it was a bunch of us that got together, and we've been discussing that for years now. I had many discussions with Darth, and he seems to like forget them. But he will never go on my channel. He's never been on my channel. He refused to go on any platform where it's not heavily moderated. Why would I go? I'm not going to do anything with Darth unless he mans up for a change and goes on my channel. Because I've been on with him on MK's channel when he had it. I was on with him on Nadia Yvette Chambers' channel, and I was on with him with Antonio Fletcher's channel. He needs to man up and start going outside his little sphere of influence. I got on here, which is a very neutral platform, right? And he'll go on here, but he won't. That's it. He won't go on my channel, even though I've been on things where he had mod control. So, yeah, I have no interest in talking to Darwin's because Darwin's is a fraud.
Gotcha. Thanks so much for your super chat from Taliesin. Snake, did you have something to add? Do you want to defend Darth?
You want to defend Darth? Oh, that could be a whole different debate.
Your nemesis from, I think you were the last person that debated
I'll
him.
go for round 2. I've got a couple clarifying statements.
I'll consider it. If Darth does it on this channel, and there's I may consider it, but that's iffy right now. But I'm not. I'd love to have Darwin on my channel where I can actually talk to him like I would any other person. Why does he get any special dispensation? Right? Other people are coming to my channel and
should make a deal. Do a MDD debate if he'll come on your channel.
He'd probably like both. Next up, thanks for your super chat, Taliesin Oberlander, who says, Steve learned logic from his pal David Earl Worden. I don't know who this is. Is this a philosopher, Steve?
No, it's somebody that I had on my channel long ago that people are trying to bring up as some kind of character assassination.
The Duke is the man. Thanks for your super chat. Who says, are rocks agnostics?
No.
Gotcha. Next up, thanks for your question from our dearest friend, Killadoggy1, who says, what is your definition of believe? I am not looking for an example, just a definition.
To hold the proposition status to be true. And it says in Rutgers, if you hold the proposition to be true, then the proper epistemic status is belief. That's pretty much what it says.
Gotcha. The Duke is the man. Strikes again, Steve. He's coming at you. He says, are rocks agnostic, Steve?
I just answered that. No, to be agnostic, you have to suspend judgment, right? You have to. If it says in SEP, the agnostic, it tries to evaluate God existing and then decides no either way, right? You don't believe it happens in either way. Rocks don't make a decision. Rocks don't suspend judgment. Rocks don't try to evaluate. You can't say rocks are agnostic. Makes no sense.
Well, would you say?
Gotcha.
Would you say the same for a lack of belief? Definition of atheism?
You want to get pedantic, then yeah, rocks lack a belief, and you want to say rocks are atheists, knock yourself out. But I think it's kind of. I think
either way, you have to either state that either if you lack a belief in both, a rock can be an agnostic, or you have to state that atheism would have to be able to analyze the statement. So rocks.
Yeah, you can't be agnostic unless you've had a chance to analyze. If you go read Dr. Jane Friedman from New York University, she wrote a paper called Suspending Judgment, which makes it very clear there are different ways to approach agnosticism, but the agnostic tries to evaluate it and then suspends judgment. And this is what the epistemic status of suspending judgment is. Believes P, disbelieves P, suspends judgment on P. Believes P is that you believe the proposition is true. Disbelieves P means you believe the proposition is false, and suspending means that you don't believe either way, right? Those are the three primary epistemic statuses.
We do have, I want to mention this because I always love giving shout outs to debate challenges in the chat. In particular, T-Jump and you, Steve, did not get to debate in Los Angeles, which is very sad.
I was all ready to go. And by the way, how'd you pin that? Is that something new?
Oh, yeah, you just
cool.
Click on the three dots to the right of their name and you can pin stuff.
New stuff. Yeah. I was actually going to go to LA before the Vosh and Destiny debate, hang out with them, and I was going to debate or discuss with T-Jump some of his positions because they make absolutely no sense to me. And so I was going to travel to LA. It's not that far from me. It's about 2 hours. But unfortunately, he was sick and he canceled, by the way, which is a really good reason not to go. If you're not feeling well, so he didn't chicken out or anything like that. No, he just wasn't feeling well. Totally get that.
Gotcha. So maybe if you guys want to open we might have a huge event at the end of the month. If you guys want to be the opener for it, or maybe right after it.
Why aren't we the main event, mofo? No, I'm kidding.
Well, I know
yeah, no, I'll go to
Steve.
LA. Yeah, no, I'll go to LA.
Steve is YouTube, okay? So sorry, Steve. I know this. You may not like this. It would be online.
We'll talk about it. Sure.
Gotcha. Thank you. And next up, appreciate your super chat. The Duke is the man. He's coming after you, Steve. He's swinging. He says, "Do rocks hold? Not B, not P, and not BP."
Asked and answered. I mean, look, if you want to put a label on a rock, knock yourself out, right? Rock has not suspended judgment, right? If you want to put these epistemic dispositions with respect to a proposition to a rock, have fun with it. I don't. I think it's silly to do that, right? Rock has never tried to evaluate anything, right? We're talking about epistemology. We're talking about beliefs positions. Rocks don't have a belief, and so just like rocks are not moral or immoral, right? They're amoral. They assign morality to a rock like T-Jump does makes no sense to me, right? So,
gotcha.
I don't know why anybody would want to. And by the way, I've had atheists argue rocks are atheist, right? There's a very prominent atheist YouTuber that's been around for years. Atheist, yeah, rocks and atheists and quarks are atheists and stars are atheists. I'm like, look, if you want to bloat your ontology where you make the term atheist be that watered down and meaningless, okay, I don't. No one has ever read anybody that does in the academia field.
I totally screwed up. The Duke is the man super chat. This was one before. He didn't ask, "Are rocks atheists?" I screwed that up. I had just a slip of the tongue. He asked, "Are rocks agnostics?"
No.
Okay. Thanks for your super chat from the Duke is the man who says, "Steve, ultimate challenge," in all caps. Yes or no in all caps. Is claim are belief and claim synonymous? Only yes or no, not please. Or
I've already answered that. I don't know how much detail he can get.
Gotcha.
I mean, even Snake, would you agree that when a theist says, "I believe God exists," they are making a claim that is the case ontologically? There's something they're calling a God that exists in the universe. Would you agree that's the case?
They're making the claim that they believe that it's the case.
Well, we assume that look, I think when somebody says they believe something, I'm gonna try to come at their word, unless they clarify later. That's maybe not what they mean. We've had that happen where we probably don't believe something when we say we believe. I get that. But when somebody says, "Look, I believe there's a God," would you not say they're making a claim that somewhere in the universe is a God, that somehow in reality God exists? That's of course making a claim.
Well, to me, the claim would have to be a knowledge claim.
Why? What does it have to do with knowledge? Again, I really don't, and I'm not trying to be demeaning, but I don't understand. We keep bringing it back to knowledge. I don't know God exists. The theist is not saying I know God exists.
For example,
but they don't have to say I believed is not a knowledge claim. It's a dosastic claim. It is a position of belief, not a position of knowledge. And you keep on switching between the two, and I'm not quite sure why.
Because if you're for the gumball example, you can say you claim that I know that there are X amount of gumballs, or you can just
okay. That's a knowledge claim. Yes.
I think that there's probably X, but you're not saying that.
Yeah, I think there's belief, right? We're not saying I know,
but you're not claiming that it is X. You're just saying that I think that it might be. Like that's where.
Yeah, no. Look, if I'm telling you, and by the way, you can go research this. If I say I believe it's the case that God exists, that is upholding the propositional content to be true. There's a verity to be had there, a truth to be had, that proposition is true. That is the claim that God exists. Theists are claiming God exists. I mean, how could you say that theists are not claiming that? Of course they're making that claim. That's what a weak atheist is not accepting. They're saying, "Hey, theists are making the claim God exists. I'm not accepting it." Now you're saying that theists are not making a claim? Because that's weird to me.
I think they accept the claim, but they're not making it themselves. Like that's a stronger case. Like say
I don't see your distinction.
Someone like your wife asks you, "Did you do the dishes?" and you go, "I think so." Like you believe it, but you're not saying yes, the dishes are done.
That's an ordinary doubt thing. No, that's a different. Now you're talking about ordinary doubt, right? But I think that the weak case has a bit of doubt. I just weird that I've never heard an atheist argue that theists are not making a claim God exists.
I think it's kind of fuzzy because there is some doubt there. Because they're saying they accept it, but there is doubt.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Appreciate your super chat from Just Flew In Concept Hut. Appreciate it. They said a strong tomato is not a weak pineapple? Thank you. Next up,
I am watching the live chat now. That's why I saw the pin thing, because I was like, this is weird. I've never seen this before.
it's like new tech. That's what we're all about. It's the opposite.
I like to
but we're trying. Okay, Dwayne Burke, thanks for your super chat. Who said T-Jump, the child of Steve Mcrae and Carol Baskin? Possible. Steve is not amused, Dwayne. Okay, thanks. Thanks for your super chat. Jesus is lard said, didn't we come from rocks?
No.
No.
There's.
By the way, when it comes to evolution, I'm sure Snake and I probably agree wholeheartedly that young Earth creation is BS. Like total. That's, by the way, that's my claim. I don't just say I lack a belief that young Earth creation is a BS. I outright say it. It's bunk. I know it's bunk. I can demonstrate it's bunk using evidence. It's a knowledge claim because it is true that the Earth is not 6,000 years old. That is knowledge. I will defend that, and I'm happy to do so. But I don't know why people are so afraid to make claims. I don't get it. Make a claim. If you think it is the case that the Earth is not 6,000 years old, then stand up for it. Don't just I lack a belief. No, you think creationism is BS. Say so. Come on, man.
Well, but
you
then
know you do.
Wouldn't that be
right?
Local atheism?
No, that has nothing to do with local atheism. That has to do with the proposition of the age of the Earth, right?
That specific God that made. Yeah.
Well, no, yeah, oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Hey, look, I will go on record. I've even said this many times. If the young Earth creationist God is contingent, which is weird because usually a metaphysical necessity, but I mean, if you're going to argue that God is contingent upon the Earth being 6,000 years old, that particular God does not exist. I don't merely lack a belief in that particular God. That God has been falsified, done, over, right? And I'm not afraid to say that. I'll take very hard positions, but we never get that far in most conversations. But I am very adamant that particular God, if you were to say that God is contingent upon the Earth being young, does not exist.
And
it's been falsified.
I wanted to also address.
We do have to, unless it's. Are you going to address the original question? Otherwise.
By the way, do you agree with me on that?
Yeah.
Snake? I mean, do you at least see what I'm going with?
I just wanted to address Jesus Lord's question of whether we came from rocks. I think he's probably referring to the Mount Morillonite clay.
That's not Morillonite is a type of clay, but that's actually a breeding.
Yeah, it's not
right?
actually.
That's where the complex carbon started to come together to form single-strand RNA and stuff. That has nothing to do with where we came from.
It doesn't actually.
Evolution didn't start after there was life.
It doesn't actually join the nucleotides or the amino acids. It's just a holding substance, like a scaffold.
It acts. I think it acts as a catalyst, right? An enzyme that made the reactions go faster, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
I think that Snake may have a friend who would love to debate you, Stephen. His playground buddy, standing for truth, might want a piece of you, Steve.
Who, me?
That's
Standing
right.
for Truth has been invited on my channel a dozen times. He always like finds out something else. He's always like, I can't make it. I've invited Standing for Truth.
I think he might enjoy debating you on creation.
I'm not going to debate him, but he can come back and talk. Not debating creationism any longer, but I find it a fascinating topic. But it's not the reason why I don't debate creationism is because people like Standing for Truth and FM3 bloviate ad nauseum.
All right, they're not here to defend themselves. We got to keep moving. We've lost. That's how we lost Hovind. We let somebody talk about him when he wasn't here.
Hey, look, I'm one that brought Hovind back in the community, if you remember correctly. Okay, so no, I'm just kidding.
I told you people, Steve is YouTube. Thanks for your.
I never had that Hovind Arn debate, even though it was great and Arn did it fantastic. But God, that was just.
You think that Kent Hovind won that one?
You're kidding, right?
Gotcha. Thanks for your super chat from the Duke. The Duke is the man. He's still here. We love you, Duke. I love Duke. I honestly have a really good memory. I remember that was a time of the channel, it's still it's exciting and mystical wonder, but that was there's a mystical wonder that debate had especially a lot of. When Duke is the man and Steve went against each other. I can even remember the theme music that we played at the start and just how epic it was. I loved it. You guys were passionate. Yeah. Next, so he says, though, thank you, Modern Day Debate. Steve couldn't say yes or no. I love it. Okay, Steve, go ahead.
It's just that you have to ask the question incorrectly. It makes sense in your questions. But by the way, Duke for a year has been just stewing in his juices about that debate. He can't get over how bad he got schooled. And it's pretty, and I don't think Snake's going to do that. I don't think he schooled me, and I don't think I schooled him really. I mean, whatever. Hopefully he learned some stuff in here. I don't think he at all showed I was wrong in anything, but he's not going to for a year go on. I don't think like Duke has, because Duke hasn't got over that beat down.
Next up, we've got to go really fast because I do have to wrap up in like 1 or 2 minutes. So we've got two more. Thanks for your super chat from Stephen Steen, who said, I'm not convinced the God of the Bible is not real. Next up, thanks for your super chat. Jesus is lard. They said, I taught high school science and math for 15 years. Okay. All right. Nice. So thank you for that. Appreciate that. And with that, we will wrap it up, folks. I'm sorry. I wish I could stay longer. This is honestly a blast, but I do have to.
Thank you.
Gotta rock and roll. And so we want to say one last reminder. I put these guys' links in the description. So that way, if you're like, I would like more of that. Well, you can have more of that by clicking on their links that I put down there for you. And as mentioned, there is also that survey down there if you would like to help further science just a bit by taking that survey on how the pandemic has affected you personally. So thanks so much for being with us, though, folks. Hopefully our producer is out there.
After show on my channel, coming up here, by the way.
You got it.
I'm doing an after show.
Praise is here. So we will link Steve's after show in the description box. If Snake has a description show eventually, we'll put that in the description box too. I mean, what I meant to say is if he has an after show, we will put it in the description as well. So thanks so much, folks. Keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. Take care.
Stay safe.